Usually, when we think about terror or horror, we think about what we can actually see.
Right. Yeah, like the monster stepping out of the closet or whatever.
Exactly, like the slasher standing at the edge of the woods.
Huh.
It's fundamentally about that visual shock.
It is visceral, for sure. But, I mean, it is also contained. You can just cover your eyes or, look away from the screen and the monster disappears.
Yeah, the threat is externalized, so it's manageable.
Exactly. But when you strip away the visuals, that dynamic just completely changes.
Oh, absolutely. Because when it's just a voice, whispering a story into your ear in the dark, suddenly you can't just close your eyes to make it stop.
Right. Your brain's amygdala just fires up.
Yeah, your imagination totally takes over, and your own mind starts painting the picture. And honestly, the bespoke monsters your brain creates for you in that sensory deprivation are, well, they're infinitely more terrifying than anything a multi-million-dollar movie studio could ever build.
I completely agree. The audio medium really forces the listener to become an active participant in their own fear. The horror isn't happening on a screen across the room. It is happening literally inside your own head.
Which is something you, our listener, already know firsthand.
Yeah.
Because, as a fellow storyteller who weaves ghost stories and folklore and myth for your own audience, you totally understand the architecture of audio fear.
Oh, definitely. They know exactly how to build that tension.
Right. And today, your mission for us is to explore the highly acclaimed audio channel Horror Babble. You're looking to craft, like, the perfect recommendation for your Spotify audience.
And you need the rich context, the history, and all those narrative threads to make that pitch irresistible.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because Horror Babble is not just some basic audiobook channel where someone mindlessly reads public domain text. It's really a meticulously curated gateway into a very specific literary ecosystem known as weird fiction.
Yeah, and we should probably define that term before we go any further, actually.
Good point.
Because for those who might not know, weird fiction isn't just a catch-all term for scary stories. It's a specific subgenre that really gained traction in the early 20th century.
Right, it blends traditional horror with, like, dark fantasy and science fiction, right?
Exactly. It creates this profound sense of cosmic dread. The goal isn't just to make you jump, it's to make you feel tiny and, totally insignificant in a massive, indifferent universe.
Wow, yeah. Insignificant is the perfect word for it. And to understand how Horror Babble serves as a gateway to that specific feeling, we really have to look at the gatekeeper.
Right, the voice behind it all.
Yeah, the primary voice of Horror Babble is Ian Gordon. And what I find so fascinating about his origin story is just how relatable it is for anyone who creates audio content. Like, he didn't hatch some massive corporate business plan.
No, not at all. He literally just stumbled into voice acting completely unintentionally.
Which is wild.
Mm-hmm.
And this was before the whole ASMR craze really took over the internet. That massive trend where people whisper into high-tech binaural microphones to give you brain tingles.
Oh, yeah, long before that was mainstream. He was just experimenting, really. And he decided to record a narration of H.P. Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu.
It's a very classic, almost grassroots creator trajectory. I mean, he didn't start with a multi-thousand-dollar studio setup or sound-treated walls.
No, the sources actually mention he started out recording his narrations sitting inside a literal tupper.
A cupboard. I love that so much.
Yeah, simply to hide from the ambient traffic noise outside his house.
Ah, the classic audio closet. I mean, we have all been there, right? Trying to muffle the sound of a passing garbage truck with, like, winter coats.
Totally. But, I mean, he has certainly leveled up since then.
Oh, big time. He eventually upgraded to a proper vocal booth in his home studio, and the industry has absolutely recognized that effort.
Yeah, they have.
Just recently, he was awarded the prestigious Rankin Award for Artistic Achievement at the 2025 Robert E. Howard Foundation Awards.
That is a huge deal.
It really is. And that was specifically for his YouTube recitals of Howard's King of the Forgotten People and The Dwellers Under the Tombs.
It is a really significant accolade. But what's fascinating here is how his delivery bridges a very specific historical gap.
What do you mean by that?
Well, 1920s and 30s prose is incredibly dense. It's full of archaic vocabulary, meandering run-on sentences, and just heavy, heavy exposition.
Oh, totally. For a modern ear that's used to, like, snappy dialogue, that can sound like someone just reading a textbook at you.
Exactly. But Gordon manages to navigate the pacing and rhythm of that purple prose so that it feels dramatic and alive rather than academic.
He really does.
Yeah.
And he does it so well that it actually confused his own audience.
Oh, right, the Reddit AMA.
Yes. There is this great detail from a Reddit AMA he did. Listeners were posting, saying they genuinely thought the narrator was like a 71-year-old man who had been smoking a pipe for 50 years.
That is hilarious.
Right. They were completely shocked to find out he's a young guy with just this incredibly mature, resonant voice. But I have to wonder, if you fall in love with this wizened, grandfatherly voice of doom, and then you look him up on YouTube and see a regular young guy, doesn't that break the immersion?
Well, it might if the medium were visual.
True.
But the disembodied nature of podcasting kind of protects that illusion. The voice becomes a blank canvas for whatever narrator the listener wants to imagine.
That makes a lot of sense.
However, it is really important to point out that audio horror is highly subjective, and Gordon's delivery isn't, a universal skeleton key for every single listener.
Right, we saw that in the sources.
Yeah, in the Reddit sources provided, a user named SparkstormWriter actually offered a critique. They explicitly praised the depth of the material Gordon curates, but they mentioned they personally find his voice to be a bit monotone.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, meaning they can only listen in short bursts.
I can totally understand that. I mean, audio is such an intimate medium. If a voice's frequency or its cadence doesn't perfectly align with your brain, it can be tough to consume for like 3 hours straight, no matter how good the story is.
Exactly. And just to be clear to our listener, we're not endorsing that critique as an objective truth.
Right, not at all. We're just impartially reporting what's in the sources. But it is a perfect example of how subjective this space really is.
Precisely. In the realm of audio horror, perfection is entirely in the ear of the beholder. But, a great voice reading a disjointed collection of stories is still just an anthology.
That's true.
This is where Horror Babble really elevates itself. The strategy isn't just about reading scary stories, it is about curating a whole ecosystem.
Let's dig into that curation, actually. Because as someone who produces audio horror themselves, you know how hard it is to keep people engaged episode after episode.
Oh, it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah. And what Horror Babble figured out here is just fascinating. They have this incredible collection called The Call of the Old Ones. And it's not just H.P. Lovecraft. It highlights all the contemporaries who answered the call of Lovecraft's weird fiction.
Yeah, the channel essentially acts as a literary historian. They trace the real-life cross-pollination between these authors.
So they actually knew each other, right?
They did. They were part of a network of pen pals who constantly borrowed from each other. Perhaps the most famous example of this, which Horror Babble documents extensively, by the way, is the bizarre, real-life literary exchange between Lovecraft and a young Robert Bloch.
Yes, I saw a note about this in the sources. Something about Bloch essentially writing a story just to brutally murder Lovecraft. How on earth did that work?
It is quite the story, honestly. So Robert Bloch, who would go on to write the novel Psycho decades later, by the way, was part of this original Lovecraft circle of pen pals.
Okay, wow. Psycho. That's a huge pedigree.
Right. So as a young writer, he penned a mythos story called The Shambler from the Stars. In the plot, a writer buys a fictional, forbidden grimoire called De Vermis Mysteriis, or Mysteries of the Worm.
Naturally. Always a forbidden book.
Always. So he takes this book to his occultist friend in Providence, Rhode Island. And this friend is very obviously a thinly veiled stand-in for H.P. Lovecraft himself.
Okay, setting his real-life friend up as the occult expert in the story. I like it.
Exactly. So the friend translates the book, but in doing so, he inadvertently summons an invisible, blood-draining entity from space.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The creature hoists the Lovecraft stand-in into the air, drains him of his blood, and as it feeds, the monster turns into a visible, red, dripping, tentacled blob before escaping into the night.
That is wild. So Bloch basically wrote a fan fiction where a cosmic horror massacres his own mentor.
Pretty much, yeah.
I can't even imagine an established author today reacting well to a teenager writing a story where they get sucked dry by a space vampire.
Right. But Lovecraft, remarkably, was delighted by it.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He actually responded in kind by writing a story called The Haunter of the Dark. And in this one, Lovecraft creates a protagonist named Robert Blake, which is a very clear stand-in for Robert Bloch.
I see. Revenge.
Pure literary revenge. So Blake goes exploring a deserted, sinister church on Federal Hill in Providence, which was once the seat of an evil cult. He finds an ancient artifact called the Shining Trapezohedron.
The Shining Trapezohedron, got it.
He gazes into it and summons a creature of darkness. Eventually, during a power outage, the creature reaches Blake's apartment and kills him, leaving his face frozen in a look of monstrous, transfiguring cosmic fear.
Okay, so they literally just killed each other off in their own stories.
They did.
And the notes mentioned it didn't even end there, right?
Yeah.
15 years later, Block wrote a sequel to Lovecraft's story.
Yes, about a character named Edmund Fisk, tracking down a missing doctor who had stolen that exact same shining trapezohedron.
This is just blowing my mind. It is basically the 1930s equivalent of a GitHub repository for horror.
That is a great way to put it.
It was like an open source mythology where anyone could thurk the code, add a new monster or a new cursed book, and just push it back to the main branch for someone else to play with.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really was a collaborative, open-source, world-building project long before the concept of open source even existed.
Yeah.
And Horror Babble's greatest triumph is making this complex, interconnected web of lore so accessible to modern listeners. They don't just read the stories in isolation. Their curation allows the listener to track the evolution of these shared nightmares across different authors' works.
And it wasn't just Lovecraft and Bloch doing this. They do the exact same thing with Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian, right?
Yeah.
I honestly had no idea he was writing cosmic horror.
Most people don't. But Horror Babble covers his contributions too. Howard was very much in this circle. Consider his story, The Black Stone.
Okay, what happens in that one?
The narrator travels to an isolated Hungarian village looking for a monolith that's mentioned in yet another fictional book. This one is called Nameless Cults by von Junst.
Another fake book to add to the library.
Exactly. He goes on Midsummer's Eve and witnesses the ghosts of a degenerate cult sacrificing a baby to a monstrous bloated toad god. And then the Turks arrive and slaughter them all.
Wow, that is intense.
Or take the fire of Ashurbanipal, where Howard takes that cosmic dread and just drops it right into the Arabian desert. It features a giant winged, tentacled demon guarding an ancient gem.
See, by presenting these authors side by side, Horror Babble completely contextualizes the whole movement. You really see how Howard brought his pulp action pacing to the mythos, while Bloch brought his psychological twists. You begin to understand the actual architecture of this shared universe.
And that shared architecture is what makes it all so frightening. By constantly referencing each other's fictional books like De Vermis Mysterious or Nameless Cults, these authors created this amazing veneer of academic authenticity.
Yeah, it felt like these ancient forbidden texts actually existed in a dusty library somewhere in the real world.
Exactly.
But, I mean, there is a fatal flaw in building your entire universe out of other people's 100-year-old toys. Eventually, someone is going to ask for the copyright back.
Very true.
Which brings us to the existential threat that completely changed the trajectory of the channel. How does a platform built on classic, shared universe literature survive when the digital rights landscape just shifts beneath its feet?
Well, they faced a massive hurdle in the form of YouTube demonetization.
Oh, man. The dreaded copyright strike.
Exactly. The sources detail a period where Horror Babble ran into really complex copyright disputes.
Yeah, it turns out some of these old pulp stories that everyone assumed were sitting safely in the public domain actually weren't. The rights had been renewed, or they were just tangled up in obscure legal webs by various estates.
It's a legal minefield. And on top of that, there was an issue where certain artwork from the horror magazine Rue Morgue was used in the videos without proper permission.
Right. So suddenly, this massive digital archive that Ian Gordon had poured his life into was being demonetized.
It is a really harsh reality for digital curators. When your entire platform relies on the intellectual property of the past, you are perpetually vulnerable.
Definitely.
However, this crisis catalyzed a major pivot. Rather than fold, Horror Babble evolved from an archive into an original storytelling powerhouse.
And this is the exact show you, our listener, are looking to pitch on Spotify, the Horror Babble Originals podcast. Because he couldn't rely solely on the public domain anymore, Ian Gordon simply began writing his own weird fiction to feed the audio channel.
He transitioned brilliantly from a curator of the past to a creator of the present. And what is fascinating is how he pulls inspiration from everyday moments to fuel this original work.
Oh, like the lake story from the notes.
Yes. For example, he noted that his story, They've Got a Killer View, was inspired simply by looking out at Lake Okanagan in Canada with his partner, Jennifer.
I love that. A passing comment about the scenery just gets mutated into a piece of weird fiction.
That is the ultimate writer's mindset. Everything is material.
Everything is material. And he didn't just write disjointed one-offs either. He started building his own modern mythos.
Right, he created original recurring characters, like Peter Van Melsen.
A paranormal investigator.
Exactly, a renowned paranormal investigator. The lore says Van Milsen deals with weird things dwelling in the hidden corners of Britain's subterranean beasts, extra-dimensional entities, resurrected ghouls, spectral vampires.
It is a deliberate and I'd say necessary expansion of the genre. And he does these big seasonal events too, right?
Yes, Gordon also established a tradition of 12 days of Christmas specials.
Oh, nice. These are long-form, serialized original audio dramas released over the holidays. The sources mention titles like It Happened on the Mysterious Isle of Seacliff, where a writer explores a shadowy island in the North Sea.
Sounds appropriately creepy for winter.
And There Were 12 of Us to Begin With, which is set during an unusual murder mystery event in the Peak District.
But wait, how does creating original fiction change his relationship with the classic material? Like, he spent years reading 1930s Lovecraft and Howard. Does a modern character like Peter Van Melsen feel like an evolution of a traditional pulp protagonist, or is it just a completely different vibe?
This raises an important question about the mechanics of how Gordon actually writes for modern ears. What he does so effectively is capture the stylistic atmosphere of the 1930s pulps. You know, the brooding dread, the meticulous narration, but he applies modern audio drama pacing to it.
Okay, but what does modern audio drama pacing actually look like in practice compared to the old stuff? Well, a traditional Lovecraft protagonist is often a very passive observer. They stumble into a creepy town, spend 3 pages describing the abnormal masonry of the buildings, faint at the sight of a monster, and then end up writing a warning in a journal before going completely mad.
Right. It is highly descriptive, but very, very static.
Exactly. Which works perfectly for a magazine in 1928, but maybe not so much for a podcast in 2026.
Yeah, modern audiences need a bit more drive.
Right. Modern audio pacing requires momentum. You have to cut out those 3-page architectural descriptions and focus on character action and auditory cues. A character like Van Melsen, acting as an investigator, allows for a much more proactive narrative structure.
He is seeking out the monsters, actively engaging with the threat.
Yes, it is much better suited to serialized podcasting because it drives the plot forward while still maintaining that thick atmospheric dread of the past.
So he essentially built his own modern Weird Tales magazine, but engineered specifically for the ear. And the success of the Originals podcast really proves that the audience wasn't just there for the specific text of Lovecraft or Bloch.
No, they were there for the atmosphere, the tone, and fundamentally for Ian Gordon's delivery of that specific flavor of horror.
It is a masterclass in adaptation and resilience.
Ah.
I mean, it shows how a creator can respect the history of a genre while actively contributing new chapters to its legacy, rather than just endlessly repeating it.
Absolutely.
So let's synthesize this whole deep dive so you have the perfect pitch for your Spotify recommendation. You can confidently tell your audience that Horror Babble is not just an audiobook feed. It is a Rankin Award-winning bridge.
A bridge between 2 eras.
Exactly. On one side, it perfectly preserves the interconnected classic pulp horror of the 1930s, that original open-source GitHub of shared monsters and forbidden books by Lovecraft, Bloch, and Howard.
And on the other side, born out of the ashes of YouTube demonetization, it's a thriving modern hub for original weird fiction audio dramas. Anchored by a voice that knows exactly how to build monsters in your mind. It really is a comprehensive and immersive world of audio dread.
So what does this all mean for you? Before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought, tailored specifically to you as a fellow podcaster creating ghost stories and folklore. Think about those fictional cursed grimoires we talked about, De Vermis Mysterious, or Funyunst's Nameless Cults.
Right, those 1930s authors traded those fake books back and forth to legitimize their monsters and make their universe feel terrifyingly real.
It was a world-building cheat code. By referencing a shared fictional academic text, it granted a veneer of authenticity to the supernatural.
Such a clever trick.
So as a creator yourself, what fictional source text, overarching legend, or recurring piece of lore could you invent? What if you wove a single mysterious artifact, or a shadowy historical figure, or even just a forbidden journal into the background of your different ghost story episodes?
Oh, I love that idea. You wouldn't even have to make it the main focus, just a quiet thread connecting the lore.
Exactly. Slowly building a shared, immersive universe for your audience to discover over time. It worked for the masters of weird fiction in the 30s, and it just might be the secret to taking your own show to the next level.
A truly fascinating challenge for any storyteller.
Well, we want to thank you so much for sharing your sources with us. We wish you the absolute best of luck with your Spotify recommendation and, of course, with your own podcast journey. Keep telling great stories in the dark.